Hello there. Have you fallen into an open manhole recently? Do you find yourself in the company of strangers? Well, then you might very well be in the feature Underground. Man gave name to all the animals, and that includes myself, Hunter Lanier. I bring with me this day something very special, a review of the upcoming Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown. I say very special because I consider Bob Dylan to be the quintessential American artist and my personal favorite writer of all time, no matter the medium. So I was both excited and trepidatious to watch this movie. And since seeing the movie, which was almost a week ago now, I've been on a little bit of a intellectual roller coaster. You know, the kind that sway in the wind and have the little bent nails sticking out. Walking out of the theater, I was feeling mostly negative about the movie. In fact, if you are a member and you watched my out of the theater impressions, you might have seen this. But as the days have gone by, the many things the movie does right have, like white blood cells, started to overwhelm the negatives. The negatives are still there. I haven't really changed my opinion on them. They've just diminished in importance to me. So for the review, I say we get the negatives out of the way first, since the negatives are more big picture things and the positives are more in the details. You may remember I made a video several months ago detailing my hopes and fears for this movie. And I have to say, the movie didn't surprise me much. It is what I feared it was going to be. An uncontroversial studio biopic helmed by a toothless director, completely at odds with how Dylan has always conducted himself as an artist. Even though the screenplay itself is about Dylan's antagonism toward expectations, monotony, and public sycophancy. A Complete Unknown, or at the very least James Mangold, the director, seems to care very much for all of those things. Bob Dylan, if anything, was and it continues to be to this day an evolving artist. As he put it so well himself, he who is not busy being born is busy dying. A Complete Unknown does not evolve the biopic. It is not the birth of something new. Now, all of this negative framing of a biopic. What is my problem with biopics, you might be wondering? Well, they tend to be straightforward and uninspired. Sorry, I'm trying not to put my hands in front of the mic, but my hands so naturally come to this location. They tend to be straightforward and uninspired. They tend to be risk averse, lest upsetting the subject, the subject's family, the state, and or the fans. And they hold your hand tight all the way through the movie's emotions and ideas, like a mother dragging her screaming child through a department store. A Complete Unknown, to varying degrees, inherits all of these storytelling sins of the father. As an example, there's at least 5 or 6 moments in the movie where James Mangold does the same bad trick. He lingers on someone's face as they watch Dylan play a new song. Their face slowly softens into this beatific stupor as they realize they are in the presence of something truly special. It's Mangold going out of his way to tell the audience that these songs are good and that you should be very impressed, just like the people in the movie are impressed. In other words, it's a laugh track, just not for laughing. And the movie is filled with these manipulative laugh tracks. One of the few daring choices that Mangold makes is that he really does linger on the music. In a nice show of respect for the songs, Dylan's and the many traditional folk songs in the movie, you either get to watch the person play the whole song or most of the song. There's none of that 15 seconds and then cutting away business. The movie also contains a lot of deep cuts. Just from my memory, I'll Keep It With Mine is performed, Railroad Bill, Farewell Angelina. It's also fun to spot all of the historical cameos that are oftentimes just in the background and don't have any lines. But you can still tell who they are just from their appearance and or costume. Like Dave Van Ronk, Odetta, Sonny Terry, and Brownie McGee. If you are a Dylan fan or just a fan of folk music or just a fan of maybe that time period of music, this is your Marvel movie. You will be pointing at the screen, explaining all the references to the person sitting next to you until you're told to shut up. Although I have mostly good things to say about the screenplay, which is written by the very accomplished Jay Cox, who, if you don't know, he wrote many Scorsese films, including The Age of Innocence, Gangs of New York, and Silence. The script does have its fair share of issues. As with Mangold's direction, there are many scenes and exchanges of dialogue that are either flat out corny or, and this may be more of a director issue than a script issue, can't really get a hold of a scene's emotional resonance, even though you can tell it's there for the taking. Perhaps the movie's most egregious sin that Dylan fans will notice, at least on first watch, and it's one of the reasons I walked out of the theater so irritated, is that the movie does neuter one of the greatest lines in music, in American history, which was shouted in defiance at the Free Trade Hall in Manchester, England, in front of a massive American flag. I audibly groaned in the movie theater when I heard the altered line. I assumed it was a cynical attempt for the movie to get a PG-13 rating, but then I looked it up after the movie was over, and the movie is rated R. So I honestly cannot tell you why the line was changed. I have no idea. And if you're a Bob Dylan fan with a keen ear, and you're wondering if this movie only goes up to 1965, how was this line from 1966 in the movie? Well, this movie takes a lot of liberties with the truth and the timeline, and that is actually one of the ways in which the movie is most true to the Dylan persona. Okay, let's get into the good stuff now. The movie makes a strong first impression. The very first thing you hear is Woody Guthrie's "So Long, It's Been Good to Know Ya." And from there, you see Dylan in the maze of New York City, a total foreigner, trying to find Woody Guthrie's hospital room. This moment of Bob Dylan meeting his hero, an ailing, dying Woody Guthrie, is as significant a moment in music history as it gets. And I think the movie understands this. In fact, it goes further and uses Dylan's love and respect for Woody Guthrie, one of the men whose words spurred him from his would-be suburban Minnesota life. It uses that love and respect as a backbone for the whole movie. It's a beautiful choice. Remember, of all the places Bob Dylan could have chosen to put his official archive that would have made total sense, Minnesota, his home state, New York City, where he built his name, he chose Tulsa, Oklahoma. Why Tulsa, Oklahoma? That seems kind of random, because that's where Woody Guthrie's archive is. Of all the places in the country, Bob Dylan wanted his legacy to be forever enshrined right down the street from Woody Guthrie's. So needless to say, theirs is a sacred lineal relationship, and I was so happy to see the movie put such an emphasis on it. On the other hand, Kerouac is never mentioned, Allen Ginsberg never shows up, and there's no attention given whatsoever to Dylan's literary influences. But of course, it's a 2-hour movie, so you can't fit everything in. You have to choose your battles, so I don't hold that against them. Now, as conventional as the film's structure and direction are, there is one thing that helps this movie rise above the other biopics, and that thing is Bob Dylan. If you happen to see Paul Schrader's review of this movie on Facebook, one thing he says that I totally agree with is that there is no 6-year period of Bob Dylan's life that isn't fascinating. And he is absolutely right. Despite Dylan never having had to overcome a disability like Ray Charles, never having to overcome addiction like Johnny Cash, and not being destined for an early death like Richie Valens or Buddy Holly. None of these easy targets for drama can be applied to Bob Dylan, who's always been a good luck opportunist and too mentally tough to ever rely on anything other than himself, much less drugs or alcohol. Without these easy targets, run ragged by upteen music biopics, Jay Cox had to find a different angle for drama. Before I saw the movie, I was really afraid they would look back at Bob Dylan through a modern filter, whether that be turning him into a political activist or just a sensitive, baby-faced Greenwich Village dreamboat, so young girls would buy the movie posters to put up on their walls. I am very happy to report back that I was wrong. Jay Cox gives us a fairly accurate version of Bob Dylan in that 1961 to 1965 era. He is an acerbic boy genius with a deep aversion to groupthink, pandering, and being told what to do. He is a thoughtful contrarian on a path all his own, whose superhuman powers of expression catch the attention of a mob of lost souls looking for a leader, yet who don't want their leader to actually lead them anywhere. They really just want someone to read their minds, repackage their thoughts in the gold ribbons of his prose, then gift their own thoughts right back to them, more poignant than they were before. In other words, they want an editor. And Bob Dylan is nobody's editor. He is a writer. He's a moving target, never to be cornered or caught. If you can pinpoint the most boring outcome, the best you could do is find out where he won't be. As he sings in Maggie's Farm, in a rare moment of frankness, they say sing while you slave, and I just get bored. A complete unknown, to my great relief, understands this. In fact, one of the more clever gambits in the script is how it concentrates the suffocating expectations of the faceless crowd into a few pivotal people in Dylan's circle. You have Sylvie, based on Susie Rotolo, his girlfriend, who is played by Elle Fanning. You have Joan Baez, played by Monica Barbaro. You have Pete Seeger, played by Edward Norton. And you have Johnny Cash, played by Boyd Holbrook. To each of these characters, Bob Dylan is someone different. So the movie is able to transfer this omnidirectional tension that Bob Dylan feels on a grand global scale into a more personal realm. If you ever meet Jay Cox, shake his hand for this idea alone. One area where I don't think the movie gets Bob Dylan right is in the very early years when he first gets to New York. By all accounts, Dylan was a bashful goofball in ill-fitting clothes who could barely maintain eye contact. To the extent he showed any real confidence, it was on stage and in character. In Chronicles, Dylan talks about how he felt like fate was looking just at him and no one else. But I don't think he ever carried himself in that way, at least at first. But in the movie, he gets to New York and he's immediately this assertive extrovert. And it just doesn't feel right. Now, Dylan as a character automatically gives Jay Cox more room to play with dialogue than a normal biopic would. Since Dylan is a self-perpetuating enigma who would quickly and unabashedly replace the truth if the truth bored him. As Dylan fans know, when he was asked at the time, having just arrived to New York, where he's from, he gave maybe 6 or 7 different answers to different people, including his own girlfriend. One thing I think is funny is that instead of saying he was from Hibbing, Minnesota, he would tell people he was from Gallup, New Mexico. And it's just funny to me that in his mind, he thought a random town in New Mexico was more interesting than a random town in Minnesota. The movie is littered with really memorable pieces of dialogue. Whether it's one of Dylan's acidic wisecracks Pete Seeger laying down some mulchy idiom, or a stoned Johnny Cash whispering rebel yells into Dylan's ear. In fact, let's talk about Johnny Cash. Cash had a profound impact on the real Dylan, and the movie honors that. In fact, if you've never read the letter/poem that Johnny Cash wrote in defense of Dylan, when Dylan was getting a lot of pushback, I highly recommend reading that. One of the best moments in the movie is this small, nondescript moment where you actually see, and Chalamet deserves some credit for communicating this just through his face, is this moment where you actually see Dylan fall out of love with Joan Baez and in love with Johnny Cash. Of the aforementioned inner circle, Johnny Cash is the most distant, but to Dylan, the most desirable. Cash is a barrel-chested personification of the rugged individualism that Dylan yearns for. It is very much a cartoon Cash, but it's the relationship between he and Dylan that the movie does a better job of depicting. I was greatly amused by Edward Norton's portrayal of Pete Seeger, who is depicted in the movie as a well-meaning but out-of-touch grandpa. I thought that was funny because I've never actually thought of Pete Seeger in that way. But for the purposes of the movie, it works. Now, let's talk about Timothée Chalamet. And I know there's a lot of young Chalamet fans whose trigger finger is quivering on the dislike button right now. But I'm sorry, I'm just going to speak how I feel. I have never found him to be a good actor. I still don't think he has any natural screen presence or charisma. That doesn't mean he can't have them in the future or he can't develop them. I just don't think he has them naturally, like, say, a Paul Newman or a Jack Nicholson. But going into this movie, and when I heard he was cast as Bob Dylan, I wondered if maybe his dead behind the eyes countenance might actually work for playing Dylan, who always seems sort of sleepy, disinterested, and in his own head, recasting and rewriting every room he's in, rearranging faces and giving them all another name. And I gotta say, I was right. This is Timothée Chalamet's most convincing performance yet. While it is a little hit or miss, and there are moments in the movie where his voice took me out of it, it just didn't sound right. There are also scenes where I was shocked at how well he was able to embody Dylan's expressions and mannerisms. Especially, for instance, in an early scene where he and Joan Baez wake up, have a little fight, and then he plays Blowin' in the Wind for her for the first time. There's something in this scene where he's able to embody Dylan in a way that he doesn't elsewhere. His performance actually gets stronger as the movie goes along. My guess is that that is for two reasons. One, Dylan himself, as the years went on, started to sort of play a character in public, I think. And that is the version of Dylan we most associate with Dylan. The black sunglasses, the big curly hair, the odd use of his hand. His hand was always doing this. That exaggerated nasally way of talking. The version that Cate Blanchett plays in I'm Not There. So Chalamet has more of a character to play as the movie goes on. And also, there's just not much footage of Bob Dylan in 1961, 1962, 1963 that isn't him performing. So, like The Great Fighters, it seems like Chalamet really benefits from tape study. I'm going to cut myself off here. I could talk about Bob Dylan forever, and by extension, this movie. I am actually planning a trip to Tulsa in the very near future to see the Woody Guthrie and Bob Dylan Centers. So if you live in Tulsa or you have traveled there yourself, let me know in the comments some of the best places to eat. I will be hungry. I'm also planning to see Leon Russell's church studio while I'm there. I am happy that a complete unknown mostly stays true to who Dylan was and is, even if it did have to be deep fried and salted for mass consumption. If this movie brings in new Dylan fans, that can only be good. I know when I discovered Dylan at 13 or 14, he's such a melting pot of influences. that you get an entire arts education just following all of those threads to Rimbaud and Hank Williams and Fellini. Plus, in this age where fame is groveled for on hands and feet, then desperately clutched like Gollum and his ring, this age where celebrities will demean themselves, will throw friends under the bus, will say or do anything to retain the public favor. This age where tribalism runs rampant, offering shelter to the insecure. Maybe a dose of Bob Dylan's unapologetic individualism is just what this generation needs. The movie itself can't really offer that, but it can point you in the right direction. Since this movie covers basically the same exact timeline as Martin Scorsese's No Direction Home documentary, and includes a lot of the same stories that are in that documentary, I can't really ever imagine a scenario where I would choose to watch A Complete Unknown over No Direction Home. I did read that Bob Dylan read the script and did a pass on it, leaving annotations, including a line or two that definitely made it into the movie. Obviously, I would be very interested in reading that annotated script. And until I do, I'm just going to assume that all of the lines that I like in the movie were Bob Dylan's. Naturally, you do wonder if he added or changed lines based on what real people said, or if it was just him trying to make the dialogue better. I lean toward the latter, and hey, if you're Jay Cox, I guess Bob Dylan is your editor. Well, those are all the thoughts that I've got. I'm all thoughted out. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on my thoughts. The movie doesn't come out until Christmas Day, so if there's something in the review that I didn't cover that you're curious about, go ahead and leave a question in the comments and I'll get back to you to the best of my abilities. If you've made it this far in the video, I assume you have found it somewhat interesting. So let me just do the old Greenwich Village pass the hat and throw in your likes, throw in your subscribes, throw in your shares. Become a paid member and you will get early reactions to movies and 2 classic movie reviews a month. Next up, I have a review coming of Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, which I have already seen, but I have yet to really collect my thoughts on. Until then, one of us must know, sooner or later, that every day underground is a good day.